Neil is here, Dr. Savitt, and okay, thanks. And we're going to start out with, I don't believe there's any unfinished business here, but we're going to start out with our health department update by Director Rash.
Great, thank you so much. So these activities are representative of the month of April. So our PIO interviewed with KTU discussing the naloxone kit build that AHD hosted in its building with the Alaska National Guard, Counter Drug Support Program, and Project Hope. Our PIO is working with staff in environmental health and the public health clinic for Bike Month events and STI testing, immunizations, the Well Baby Clinic, and the lead testing clinic. Staff were very excited and accepted the proclamation from the Assembly and Mayor Bronson celebrating National Public Health Week. Our Anchorage Opioid Community Resource Network, formerly the Anchorage Opioid Task Force, is working with Travis Hedwig at UAA to conduct a secondary research review of the existing opioid response work in Alaska and a project with the Division of Behavioral Health implementing the Icelandic prevention model. Funding for this research will be paid out by utilizing the Exhibit E funds from the settlement dollars. The secondary research review will create an inventory document to be delivered to the Anchorage Health Department and work with others as the municipality takes next steps towards implementation. This document will be used as a guide to assist in determining the most appropriate ways to implement the opioid funds within the municipality of Anchorage. The Anchorage Health Department Clinic has obtained a $50,000 grant. With these funds, we will be looking at where to install harm reduction vending machines in the areas of the municipality. The clinic will share their information with the task force, who will be hosting a town hall on next Thursday, June 13th at the Wilt of Marston Theater from 5:30 to 7:30. This event is to learn about the opioid use in Anchorage, share stories, and hear about how to get involved to make a positive impact in our community. Through this event, we hope to gain community feedback in areas of need related to appropriate utilization of the settlement dollars. In last month's report that I believe Lisa has posted online, you'll see the Settlement E document. You'll also see what the task force had come up with for next steps. So we had a meeting 2 months ago in which we all met and we discussed, what is it going to look like? Where do we want to use these settlement dollars? What's going to make the biggest impact in our community? So we have that rough outline posted with our document from last month. Currently, our vacancy rate at the Anchorage Health Department is 17.7%, so we continue on the downward trend. With the Anchorage Safety Center Patrol, overall, 313 individuals utilize services more than once, therefore creating 585 intakes or occurrences due to multiple visits. They transported 405 individuals and responded to 1,099 calls. Within our environmental health services, in April, they addressed 49 complaints, performed 163 inspections, made 547 customer service contacts, completed 5 plan reviews, worked on 26, issued 66 permits, issued 3 food worker cards, and responded to 7 foodborne illness complaints. During April, the air quality specialist responded to 25 citizen complaints regarding air quality, noise, mold, and pest issues. Along with other technical advisory committee TAC representatives, jointly reviewed and recommended revisions to bike and pedestrian advisory committee and citizen advisory committee comments concerning the performance environmental linkages study initial report concerning functionality of MOA's transportation system. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that Member Salt has joined us.
They posted our daily air quality forecast via web and phone messages, reviewed Federal Highway Administration guidance to advise future transportation efficiency strategies, analysis to demonstrate project eligibility for the FHWA grant funds for that objective. During April, our environmental health educator planned for upcoming events in May and June. 1,400 bike maps were distributed to bike shows throughout the city. We accepted in a cohort with Bike Anchorage, the Bike Month Proclamation, supported events and completed events at the Senior Center Health Fair, And then created and posted social media content for air quality and food programs, bike safety, and our events. Currently for inspections to date, 191 have been completed so far. In our Women, Infants, and Children program, we have a total participant level of 3,781. The team completed one vendor audit in Girdwood. They provided referrals to the Well Baby Clinic and the lead testing clinic. The USDA Food and Nutrition Services released its final food package changes, which include permanent increase to fruits and vegetables amount, expanding whole grain options, more flexibility to dairy products, canned fish to more packages, and much more. WIC state agencies will have 2 years to implement these changes. They completed some outreach events at some farmers markets. And with our WIC breastfeeding peer counselor program, we have one peer counselor on staff currently providing breastfeeding support to 60 women currently enrolled. 59 total contacts were made in February to the 60 enrollees, and 4 breast peer counselors are in training and expect to see clients at the end of May. So our goal again is to have a participation level of 9,557 by 2025. And so we are steadily on the rise. With our community health nursing program, we tracked 2 pathogens in April. Our clinic conducted 183 routine vaccines that were provided in the month of April. And there's a listing of those here in the report. They treated and case managed 11 clients with active TB, performed 101 blood tests, the IGRAs, and 2 skin tests. Within our sexual health clinic, 144 clients were seen in the STI self-referral walk-in clinic ages 15 to 65. There were currently 1,296 STI tests performed in the month of April, which resulted in 37 positive STI cases. In the month of April, the team also handed out 76 naloxone opioid kits at the various locations, so our clinic, front desk, outreach events, and at some staff training events. 5,638 condoms were distributed throughout the municipality. And through our teen unintended pregnancy prevention program, 311 youth age 13 to 22 were educated on sexual health and relationships at 5 community partners: Mears Middle School, Stellar Secondary School, Career Academy, Central Middle School, and East High School. And that is the report for April.
Thank you very much. I know Member Brawley had a question.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. The first one was on the opioid settlement dollars. So thanks for the update. And I know we have, the Assembly members get kind of regular email meeting invites for that, but I have not participated. Excuse me, but I also have not seen kind of a general briefing or information about, how much money the municipality is getting, what we can do with it. So I was just wondering, and I don't know if that's your guys' responsibility, but I wonder when we might see that. Then I have a second question, but it's a different topic.
Yeah, so I can definitely provide an overview in a document or an email. And currently, as of January, when I last checked, the municipality has $913,000 that are sitting there eligible for use under the Settlement E document. But I can definitely provide that update.
Yeah, thanks. And is that, because if I remember correctly, there's a larger sum in the first year and then there's some recurring money too. So is that just the sum for this year? Or do you have any idea for future years?
No, so that is the sum from the initial disbursement that we have. And so the funds that sit in this account can roll from year to year, which is great. I believe we receive a little under $400,000 a year, and I believe it's for the next 18 years that the municipality will receive their portion of the distribution.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So yeah, just as some written update to all Assembly members would be helpful. And then my other question, separate topic, I'm looking at this food facility inspections per year, and then of course, this is the graph on page 5. And it looks like the story it's telling is there's a minimum we're supposed to be doing as recommended by FDA, and then there's code that's required, and then there's what's actually happening, which is lower. So I wonder if you could maybe talk about that a little bit more, or maybe ways to improve that, and if it's staffing or if there's other issues too.
Yeah, great question. And so this amount that you see, the 191, will increase obviously throughout the year. So every month it should increase. We do have some staffing challenges. We have some vacancies. We have currently 2 environmental, 1 sanitarians vacant. We have 1 sanitarian 2 vacancy. And then we have 1 individual that's still in training. And so obviously with the individual in training, she's working up to her full caseload. And so we are trying to really focus on those high priority and complaints while trying to balance and meeting this goal. So we are hopeful that we can get staffed up soon, get those individuals trained out in the field, and try to meet or exceed the goal for the municipality. In order to meet the recommendations by the FDA, that would require more staffing on top of the staffing levels that we currently have. And I believe in the past, when we've done that analysis, we would need at least 2 more full-time inspectors.
Okay, yeah, thanks for clarifying. And thank you for also mentioning that that's an annual number, because it looked low, but that makes sense that we're only not even halfway through the year. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Is there anyone else that has questions? I had something on the, oh, can you tell us what, you said that you had something done at the health department did you get a new faucet put in? You were talking about the water quality and that, and I don't know if we said that in a health policy committee meeting, but wondering if there's been improvements to the building.
Yeah, so very exciting. We did receive, they installed a filtered water station at the facility that those funds were obviously went through the assembly approval appropriation 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, maybe. So we're really excited about that. So now we have 2 stations, one on the first floor, one on the 4th floor, that have filtered water stations for staff and visitors. We continue to look at other improvements within the building and working with M&O to try to figure out next steps on those various topics, everything from electrical to carpet replacement. Obviously, as we know, it's an aging building, so there's a lot of upkeep. From what we understand, the boiler will be replaced this summer, so that will be very exciting to help regulate the heating and cooling of the facility, or just the heating of the facility, and making sure that it is regulated in the springtime and the fall time, because it's either on and it's very, very hot, or it's off and we use space heaters in those specific areas. So we're really excited about that boiler being replaced this summer.
I had one more question. I was at the health department for a meeting and boxes were being moved in, and Ms. Johnson said there was another an employee that was above her, and I haven't really heard anything about that. Is there a new director of homelessness or a division director? I know Ms. Johnson said she would technically be above her, and I haven't heard of anybody.
I have not heard of anyone. Our executive team is fully staffed, obviously minus the director position, but we have a division manager in public health, human services, Dr. Savitt in clinical services, and then Alexis in housing services. So I don't know of any other executives. And obviously we have an epidemiologist in our PIO as well.
Well, maybe I misunderstood what was going on. Thank you very much for your detailed report. It's always fantastic. Are there any other questions? Oh, Mr. Littlefield.
Thank you, Chair. I got a quick question and follow up on what Member Brawla brought up. You're short on people to meet the FDA requirements. Is that in the works to get those positions filled? Or another question, I'll do a follow up after that one.
Yeah, so our focus has continually been to staff the levels that we need within the health department. And so we have put together what it would look like budget-wise to obtain 2 additional employees, but we have not put that forward yet. Hopefully, looking at whatever our budget looks like for the next year or the years after, we can put in place a plan to move forward with that.
Okay, and a quick follow-up, the 400 a year that we get for the next 18 years, is that federally funded? Or where's it coming from? Because I'm concerned that if we're not meeting FDA requirements, that we may lose some of that funding because we're not meeting the requirements. That's my biggest concern. And we probably need to approach that if that's going to affect that.
Are you talking about the opioid settlement dollars? And
Yes.
so they're two separate,
Okay.
arenas. So the state of Alaska had settled as part of the settlement. So the municipality will continue to receive those funds regardless of what we're doing in environmental health.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. So on our agenda, our next was going to be UAA Center for Human Development, and they were unable to make it this morning, I think. And so our next guest is Christine Collins, and then there's other people involved in the outpatient competency restoration, and they're here to tell us a little bit about the program, what it does, where it's going to be located. So go ahead.
Hi, so this is Dr. Christy Becker. I'm just going to give you guys a brief overview and then turn it over to Dr. Collins. So essentially in the state of Alaska, competency restoration beds have been very limited over the course of the history of the state. In fact, we have the lowest number of inpatient beds per capita for this purpose. And Dr. Collins is going to describe competency restoration to you all and give you some definitions so you understand what on earth we're talking about. Essentially, we sought to expand that programming both with conducting some restoration in the jails and also in our community with our lower level individuals who have lower level crimes, defendants without serious criminal histories. We initiated this process and we found a site that is in the Fairview neighborhood. It is in the same building where Choices is located. And initially, the assembly approached us with some concerns, specifically Mr. Constant and Ms. Zalatel contacted us with some concerns about the size of the program and things along these lines. There was some misinformation involved, and there was a belief that this was going to be some 80 to 100 people, which is not the case. The program is currently designed to just host 10 individuals in group sessions on a biweekly basis, so twice a week groups, and perhaps some individual sessions in addition to that, with a total number of 10 participants at any given time. Any expansion of the program would include just an additional group no larger than 10 at any one time, but no expansion is planned currently. So we encountered some difficulty in getting folks admitted to the program. And so what we're here to revisit after we had kind of clarified the misinformation with the two aforementioned assembly members was that we cannot find the unicorns that we are looking for. We are struggling to find defendants that met our inclusion criteria. And so Dr. Collins has looked to some other neighboring states, and it's going to provide you guys some information and an overview about that. And any of us can take questions at any point in this conversation. Thank you.
So regarding competency restoration, so our program is for defendants who have been charged with any type of crime. And for those defendants, if they have been found not competent, so meaning that they are unable due to having a mental illness to be able to understand the nature of the court system as well as the charges against them and be able to assist in their defense, the court then orders those defendants to undergo restoration treatment, which looks like a variety of things we ask them to participate in, just general mental health treatment, comply with medications if so necessary, and also learn about the court system, how to work with their attorney, how to regulate their emotions in court, and how to reasonably and logically weigh evidence, weigh information in their case, and their legal decisions. And so that's the type of treatment that we provide in the restoration system. So we opened this program in November of 2023. And as of April 2024, we had over 59 referrals to the program, 26 of which were for restoration for out of custody defendants. 16 of those had felony charges, and 2 had misdemeanors involving a use of force, both of which preclude people under our current criteria from participating in the program. Of those of the 2 people who had misdemeanors that did not involve a use of force, one had treatment compliance issues that took them out of the running of the program, and the other did not attend their bail hearings and acquired additional charges that then precluded them from being able to participate in the program. So our 2 unicorns were no longer our options. These numbers of the 59 plus did not include the defendants who were not referred to restoration services at all because they didn't meet outpatient criteria or because they had charges that were dismissed before they even received a referral to API. Those are typically defendants who have a known history of mental health concerns that are also charged with misdemeanors frequently. So what's slowing our referrals to the outpatient, our referrals and admissions to the outpatient program? It's really a few different things. It's mostly a lack of access for patients who reside outside of the Anchorage Bowl. So currently our only outpatient program is that particular building in Fairview. And then the patients who have a history of misdemeanor charges involving a use of force and or felony charges also currently preclude them from participating in our program. And so when considering how to expand our program in a reasonable manner, we looked at other states around the nation. In the United States, there are currently 44, or as of 2016, there were 44 states and or territories that allowed for outpatient competency restoration. There were 7 states that had, quote, silent statutes, so they did not address the issue of inpatient versus outpatient competency restoration. And then there were 7 states that specifically prohibited outpatient competency restoration within their statutes. Alaska, during this study, was actually one of the 7 states that did not did not allow for outpatient competency restoration, but we now allow for that at this time. It was silent, sorry. And so looking at our neighbors, when I was looking at specific statutes to assess, I looked at the West Coast and some of the Southwest territories. And then I also included the state of Colorado, the state from which those 2 special masters who came and did an evaluation of our system in 2019 come from. And then the state of Wyoming, because they have a more similar population to the state of Alaska. So when looking at Oregon, in this state, they determined that somebody can participate in the outpatient restoration program as long as they are clinically appropriate. And for them, any defendant who has a misdemeanor charge can participate in this program as long as they do not pose a risk to the public health and safety. For defendants who are charged with a felony, a determination can be made that they could be treated in the hospital if treatment there is absolutely necessary and if they pose that health and safety risk. Then in the state of California, they do not actually attempt to restore defendants who have been charged with misdemeanors at all anymore. They will look at the different defendants who've been charged with felonies. For those who have been charged with a felony, if the defendant has been charged with a violent felony, they'll consider whether the person should be treated in an inpatient setting due to public health and safety concerns. In the state of Texas, they particularly look at if a person has been charged with a Class B misdemeanor, then they can be treated in an outpatient setting for up to 60 days. For those who have been charged with either a felony or a Class A misdemeanor, then they can be treated within the community of up to 120 days, so long as they do not pose a public health or safety concern. In the state of Arizona, their statutes don't offer any specific guidelines regarding whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony. They just ask that the court consider the least restrictive option that's appropriate for the means of public health and safety. If inpatient if inpatient treatment is necessary and whether the defendant is willing to participate in treatment. In the state of Wyoming, this is one of our states that has a silent statute regarding outpatient competency restoration. So in Wyoming, these statutes really specifically just address evaluations and how these occur. The statutes indicate that when somebody evaluates somebody for competency to proceed legally, if the defendant is not competent, they ask that they make a recommendation to see if a, quote, designated facility is appropriate for the person to receive services at. And then documents that I found when I was trying to research this from 2016 indicate that they were experiencing what Alaska and the rest of the nation are experiencing, which is a significant increase in the number of referrals for competency evaluations. I've not been able to find any newer or updated information on how they've addressed this issue or how they are addressing the subsequent expected increase in need for restoration treatment. In the state of Nevada, the court determines that if the defendant does not pose a danger to himself or herself or others, then an inpatient commitment is not necessary for treatment, then they can also receive services in the outpatient setting. Then Colorado, lastly, is the state that if a defendant is placed on bond by the court, so if they're deemed bail eligible, then they can receive any restoration services in an outpatient setting. And so that is for any type of charge. So our current requirements, as we've kind of addressed already, our requirements, we tried to make them as stringent as possible since we were starting this brand new program, and we wanted to make sure that we were ushering in this program in the safest and slowest way possible. We had stringent criteria of the person's current charges needed to be a misdemeanor and could not involve a use of force. We also said that the person cannot have any history of felony charges that includes convicted or not. We also said the person needs to be the patient needs to be psychiatrically stable, so they need to be able to not have any symptoms that were so severe that they would not be able to maintain their basic needs of health and safety. They also needed to be treatment compliant, so if that was with taking prescribed medications or attending any kind of mental health treatment that was already requested of them, and then that they could not have any suicidal or homicidal ideations, intent, and that they didn't display any aggressive or assaultive behaviors that would make them a safety risk. So our proposed requirements are to expand these to include the same elements of psychiatric stability, treatment compliance, and suicidal and homicidal ideation risk. But our changes are that the person be charged with a misdemeanor or a low-level felony. So this would be any misdemeanor, including those that involve a use of force, and nonviolent felonies. So things like DUI, fraud, stalking, substance possession, theft of a firearm, evidence tampering. And these will be assessed on a case-by-case basis to see whether they are appropriate. And then we also ask that the patient have similar levels of charges in their history. So they will no longer be precluded from the program if they have a history of low-level felony charges or misdemeanor charges that involve a use of force. Again, those will be assessed on a case-by-case basis. And those are our proposed requirements. And so we're happy to take any questions.
Member Brawley?
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate this kind of outline of who can exactly be served by this. First, so my understanding of this, and I just want to make sure that I'm correct, is competency is not treatment in the sense that it is like a behavioral health program. It is specifically so that somebody is prepared and can basically stand trial, right? That they're considered, that they can understand the consequences of their actions and so on. And so correct me if I'm wrong, I'm seeing nods, but that's the purpose of the program.
Yes, you're correct. At this level in the community, what we end up with in reality, however, is a lot of stabilization. It is slower when they're not hospitalized for the restoration process. And the goal with these misdemeanors and even some of the lower level felons is typically not realistically prosecution. So in the event that these defendants were restored to competency successfully in the outpatient program with medication and treatment, our plan and the state's plan is to then roll them into the CRP court, where they would then have a host of services. Their charges could be managed legally. Prosecution could occur, but in all likelihood, should they work the program, they would get the benefits of the mental health court and have a better transition into community living and hopefully greater degree of stabilization. So there's secondary gain in the process.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate the looking at, because it looks like, as you said, this program is designed for a certain kind of, I guess, lower touch individual or whatever. But then because we have maybe relatively few of those, or just so many people are that higher level, that I appreciate the looking a little wider. I guess, can you also describe a little bit, just so folks understand, if someone is found incompetent to stand trial, then what are the options for the state at that point? And again, I know it depends on the case, but generally, at what point do they enter the civil commitment system, or how does that work? Or does it not work?
So for individuals who have been found incompetent, they first go through a series, they could potentially go through 3 different periods of attempts to restore them to competence. There's a 90-day period, a second 90-day period, and a 180-day period of restoration. Currently, those restoration options are inpatient at API in one of those 10 restoration beds. In the jail-based program, should they be accessible to the Anchorage Correctional Facility, and then also possibly within this outpatient competency restoration program for those defendants who have been found not competent and not restored by the time the court determines that, then there are the options of, typically what happens is either their case is dismissed. Well, typically their case is dismissed. And then at that point, the court has the option of referring them to a civil commitment bed should they appear appropriate for one.
So to just sort of summarize that plainly, we have one calendar year, no matter what the charge is, to restore a defendant to competency to proceed. If within the course of that calendar year they have lower level charges, they will often dismiss the charges before the full year, because we don't hold people in any sort of restoration program longer than they would have been held had they been convicted, right? There's a balancing there. For those that have very serious crimes, so sexual assault of a minor, murder, attempted murder, Class A felonies, any unclassified felonies, those cases at the end of that year, if they are dismissed, the DA is going to file a civil commitment on them, and now under the new statutes, that's mandatory. And then your practitioners in our hospital, if we believe they're unsafe to return to the community, are also going to file for civil commitment. They're placed then on a 30-day commitment, then a 90-day commitment, then rolling 180-day commitments. And under the new statute, there is the option for a 2-year-long commitment period for this population in particular. So those people with high-level crimes that are still considered a significant danger to themselves or the community are generally held at API for lengthier periods of time until a stable discharge plan can be created, which often involves an outpatient commitment and continued oversight over that person upon release.
Thanks. And I have a couple more questions. That's okay. One is really, well, I guess both are about numbers. Specific for this, kind of what, is there a percent or a rough number increase in so of the share of the people who fall in this category, how many more could be served by these program changes, roughly speaking? Like, is it 10%, et cetera? And then my other question is kind of more general, since we have folks from API here, kind of what is the current census? Because I know folks are always interested, like, oh, why don't we send people to API, or is it overfilled? Or, maybe just describing generally what that looks like right now. Thanks.
So I'm going to start, and then I'm going to ask Melissa Luce to finish this answer. We have quite a few referrals annually, and she's going to be able to give you a reasonable number of about what that average is. It is increasing year over year at a rate that I wouldn't characterize as truly exponential, but it's pretty close. And this trend is consistent nationwide, where more and more forensic patients are being referred for competency-related issues. And so will this expand our programming? Yes, we will move from having only 10 available beds at the most acute level in the state hospital to having a program with 10 in the hospital, 10 in the jail-based program, and 10 in the outpatient program, ideally, We're also looking to enter Highland Mountain, and we are collaborating with the Department of Corrections to open a 10-person restoration program at the women's facility. Further, we have the ability to more readily expand the jail-based and outpatient programs because we don't require bed space. So we can send our teams in to do the work and the groups and the classes to those places much more readily than we can at API, which would then reserve those 10 beds for the most acute, most severely ill individuals in the state who are best served at that level, at the psychiatric hospital level. And Melissa, if you could just briefly touch on our annual data, number of evaluations, and kind of the increasing load that you've seen working for us over the years.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Becker. So I believe last fiscal year, we had about 350 referrals for competency evaluations. Of those 350, I want to say about 150 were referred for restoration. Of those 150, only about 48 ended up being admitted for competency restoration, and this is because the majority of these people fell off the wait list. We have a very lengthy wait list due to being on the wait list too long, and the court will just eventually dismiss their charges. Right now, our wait list for competency restoration is 160 days, which is unfortunate because the first period of restoration is 90 days. So these individuals are basically languishing on the wait list for the first 2 periods of restoration. And once they get to us at API, we're not really able to, we don't have much time to actually do the restoration programming with them. So hopefully these programs are going to help alleviate that. They haven't been implemented long enough for us to see a significant downward trend in the wait, but I'm very hopeful that that is going to be happening. And I wanted to note too that on these proposed changes for the outpatient program in particular, we haven't been able to serve anybody. Like Dr. Becker said, we haven't found that perfect defendant who meets all that criteria. So adopting these proposed requirements will, it'll increase the I think it would increase it by 100%. I mean, we're going to actually be able to get individuals in the door and get them services.
I think that's all we have. So one question I have, so this would be at the state level, this decision to make this change? Is that correct?
Yes, the decision to make the change is at the state level within our facility, our teams, based on the national data that Dr. Collins presented. But our goal in reaching out to you all as community partners and other people that we are going to communicate this change to is to be transparent, is to share with the community what our intent is, and is to sort of demystify and destigmatize any level of concern that may exist about this population. And to clarify that these are individuals who are essentially already on bail, who are already being bailed out of custodial settings while they wait for a bed at API. And this is really just an additional layer of service that we can provide and hopefully help to stabilize them while reaching the state's goals in regard to restoration to competency to proceed.
I was just going to follow up. How long will this change take to put in place? So you're asking to make it more available, this program, and so you've petitioned to the State Department of Health, or yeah.
So we currently have the support of our commissioner's office and law in making the change. We've also reached out to courts statewide, public defenders, and prosecutors who are in support of this change and of this program. Effectively, this is our last stop, and sharing this with you is the last sort of group of individuals that we needed to communicate with. So our plan would be within the next few weeks to expand the criteria and accept referrals from the courts under the new criteria, with the goal of slowly building that program, probably starting with 2 or 3 people. I would anticipate by September, October, we would have a full host of 10 participants in the program. which is overseen by Dr. Collins. Then we have two psychiatric nursing assistant staff who are very good at interfacing with the patients who are also involved so that she's never providing the service by herself. And we have adequate staffing, with Choice is also sharing our space in that building. So.
I had one more follow-up question. So if you change this to where they're a little bit more higher level, I can imagine that the assembly people and the neighbors of that community may have more concern. And I was thinking, are the people who would participate being transported to Fairview? If there was transportation that we know they're getting back to their home base after and they're not languishing around the Fairview area, that might be put some people at ease.
Yes. So one of the things that we provide with with people who are admitted to the program is bus passes, particularly to get back and forth for those individuals who cannot come to the facility on just a bus pass. We will actually provide taxi vouchers to bring them back and forth. And we do have requirements for the outpatient facility that they can only arrive within about 30 minutes of their scheduled appointment time outside of the facility, and that they need to leave also within 30 minutes of their scheduled appointment ending. And regarding the people who are already in this area, this is the building that already has Choices, and Alaska Behavioral Health also just joined us. So this is actually a facility that hosts a lot of mental health services for this particular community already. We have a lot of people who are past defendants who are already enrolled in those programs, and also current defendants who are awaiting services that are enrolled in those programs. So we imagine that there is already a lot of overlap in who is in this area and frequenting this area, particularly with the homeless shelters, the different cafes, the neighborhood services that are around.
And I would add, if I may, these defendants are also going to be clinically monitored. So in the event that they decompensate, become more symptomatic, engage in more problematic behaviors that would be of greater concern to the community, we have the ability to reapproach the court and have them removed from the community-based program and return to the jail-based program or to the hospital-based program. Should they become acutely ill and require hospitalization, we have the ability and the authority on our clinical team to ex parte them to the hospital, should that become a need. So we do have some tools also to manage things if an individual starts to have trouble managing their behavior in our community.
In addition to that, we've been working with CIT and MIT to create MOUs and ways to talk about cases with them, and then also call them in cases that we do not feel that we can control ourselves. However, these are meant to be patients who are fairly stable in the community, already receiving services, able to commute back and forth on their own. And so we are anticipating that with that level of stability, that we won't anticipate very many of those problems.
I'm sorry, I've got a lot of questions. So it seems to me like if at a certain they're on a wait list or something's come up that they haven't been able to do this competency restoration, do some, kind of play that game that if you avoid doing this competency, then you may just get the charges dismissed? Because you said if you had so many days to get through that program before it just goes away?
So it's a good question. The first answer I would provide you is less often than you might imagine. The vast majority of these defendants have thought disorders, so they're very disorganized, they're very ill, illnesses like schizophrenia, or they have severe cognitive impairments, fetal alcohol syndrome, other genetic syndromes like Down syndrome, Fragile X syndrome, or just low cognitive functioning in general. So not often, but in our evaluation process as trained criminal psychologists, the team in front of you has a lot of tools that we can use to identify what we refer to as malingering or feigning or exaggerating. And we are really attuned to that in this process because there is secondary gain in the legal process to having your charges dismissed. Most people are not going to go to that level of effort on a DUI case and the kinds of cases that we're talking about here with these individuals, it's much more likely that we would see that level of behavior in cases that involve Class A or unclassified felonies, where there's really a lot at stake.
In addition to that, for those defendants who are both in the outpatient competency restoration program and the jail-based restoration program, if they have two back-to-back unexcused absences, so if they're no call, no show in the outpatient community, or if they're refusing in the jail and it's not due to appointments or segregation for some reason, illness, anything like that, then we do actually let the court know. And at that point, it would be for the attorneys, the court to decide whether they should instead, whether they should stay on the list and maybe just go to API instead. And so that's a clinical decision that we also discuss within our team of saying like, hey, this person is either too ill or not willing to participate in these programs. And we think that we need more eyes on them more frequently. And so we will refer them to the most supervised setting, which is API.
Thank you. And I think a lot of my constituents say, well, why don't you just put them in API? And I think maybe it would be good for people to hear the cost per day for inpatient at API and a cost for a program like this, the difference.
So API is an 80-bed facility. I'll start there. And out of those 80 beds, we can subtract 10 for the competency restoration defendants that are there on that unit. So 70. Then we have 10 adolescents, so 60. So that's 60 acute adult psychiatric beds to serve the entire state of Alaska. It isn't big, right? We are full today. Full does not mean 80. I think we have about 77 because we have a couple of patients who can't share rooms for a variety of reasons. Among that patient population, around 15 of our patients today are individuals who were unable to be restored to competency and were deemed unsafe to return to the community and are being held relatively long-term, greater than 90 days, secondary to our belief that they're not clinically stable enough to return to the community following their criminal behavior. Among that population, our longest length of stay is 10 years. So even when I say we have 60 beds, we truly have even less than that in terms of rolling beds available to the community. The bed cost per day is around $2,500 right now. In terms of the cost of this program, I would have a hard time currently quantifying it because we haven't gotten it started yet. But essentially, you're looking just at the salary cost of the employees involved and the rent. I believe the rent of the facility came in somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 a month, but please don't quote me because I'm not in finances. So the rent and the staff, but of course it's going to be markedly less than the day rate or the bed rate at the hospital at that much more acute level of care.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Miss Sophia, we don't usually take questions, but I'm going to go ahead. We don't have a big crowd and sure, come ahead.
There was one statement that you made that
Identify yourself and then.
Miss Sophia O'Neill of Eagle River. One of my concerns is that the statement that because of the lack of staff and being able to place these people, and what I mean by these people is just people in need of your assistance. My question is, when you say that because of lack of space, people can time out of the system and then be released. Now, what happens in reference to that? Because all that is basically transplacing the problem. It's being put upon the community, upon law enforcement, upon your emergency assistance. And so if you could address that, I'm sure the public would so appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia, for that question. So you're correct. Essentially, this is a legal decision. And so the court is compelled by statute to dismiss after a certain period of time has passed. And that amount of time is dictated federally under a ruling known as US v. Jackson, which basically says that the defendant cannot be held, as I mentioned earlier, longer in custody than they would have been held had they been found guilty of the allegations. That is a civil liberties protection, and the wait lists at the length that they are create a due process problem and a civil liberties problem. And that is my understanding of why the courts elect to dismiss some of the lower level cases as they, sort of time out in the system. I do agree that that does place, at times untreated individuals back into the community. And the goal and rationale underpinning these programs, both at the jail and at the community outpatient-based level, is to try to create more of a safety net to catch some of these individuals while also reducing our wait list to much more palatable numbers so that a greater number of individuals legally involved experiencing mental illness can receive the services that are required by law and can do it in a more expedited fashion. So the goal of this some extent is to actually in part address that community concern. And I do hear that and I appreciate her concern. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any other questions? Okay, so I don't think we have anything under legislative priorities unless you do. Okay. And so at this point, if there's public that would like to speak, you will have 3 minutes. Anyone? Okay. Oh. I think that you can come on up to the microphone again, and I don't think anyone else wants to speak, so it's your 3 minutes. I love these clocks, except you won't be able to see them from where you're sitting. Oh, it's here too. Okay.
Thank you. Am I able to be heard? Can hear me? Okay. You've already met me. I'm Sophia O'Neill of Eagle River. Okay, I stand before you today because there's not in reference to what we went over today, but in reference to something that I think that should be considered. Since I was 12 years old until I was 17 years old, I wore glasses. And it wasn't until I was 17 years old and got contacts that I was relieved of headaches, miraculously. The contacts could also provide for me perfect vision, where glasses never could. And I was able to read, and it just enhanced my life considerably. And my point of this is that less than a month ago, I was hit with debris and my eyes were injured. And not only did I have scarring on the white of my eye, luckily my vision was not impaired, but an infection set in. It was just dreadful. I went to 3 different eye practitioners, optometrists, and I couldn't be provided service because as of right now, I do not have health coverage. Now, I was admonished for not just getting glasses. I got tired of explaining why. I went ahead and waited until I had enough money because there wasn't any way for me to be able to see, to be served. I was told to go to the emergency room. Now, Wasilla did accept me after 3.5 weeks to be seen, and they provided me with the ability to see now. But for 3.5 weeks, even me attending assemblies and being active in the community, I was essentially without sight. My nearsightedness is extreme, but with contacts 20/20. So my point is that I was referred to an emergency room, which, having not been seen, this is just requesting, my eyes are injured, they're red, I'll send you pictures. May I please be seen? And I explained. An emergency room visit would have been over $2,000, not including the ambulance ride I would have had to incur. And all that would do is they would tell me what a wonderful ER nurse told me was to flush with saline, make sure that you don't put contacts back in, etc. But even as prepared a person as I am, I didn't have a backup. That was my last bear. Economic situation, not lack of preparedness. So my point is that this is something that needs to be looked into. I am not a minority with this. There are a number of people in the IT field, people who use computers, people like librarians, people who need their eyes on a regular basis, that glasses just don't work for them. And if that is something that could be looked into and thought about, that, you know, it's a disservice to a fair amount of the community, that if you lose your insurance by no fault of your own, there's a myriad of things that can handicap you and lower your quality of life. Thank you.
And if you had more that you wanted to add, you feel free to email it. And thanks. If there is no one else, I think we are ready to adjourn.